Hello, and welcome to our exclusive YouTube channel, The Ministry of the Real Truth. Thank you for taking the time to check out our latest video upload. This is a massive shout out to all our subscribers. Thank you very much, because you have helped our channel to grow immensely, and also those who just simply viewed and then went on their merry way, and those left their comments. Thank you very much. You are much appreciated. Today we're looking at a book with never before seen photos, apparently, called Buried Alive by Jack Cuozzo. Hidden, suffocating from the pain of a story left untold, the startling truth about Neanderthal Man. And there's one review on this particular website of it below. Subject: wow, a solid refutation of the idea that Neanderthals were a separate species from man. This book has more research shown, measurements provided, and explanatory data notes than do 99% of books spouting the usual evolution dogma. The author was a dental genius and delivers a withering barrage of criticism to the way mainstream anthropology has sidelined the dental and growth rate implications readily evident in these ancient human remains. The author was able to examine remains firsthand, x-ray them, and photograph them in order to expose the big fraud that is evolution. It is worth remembering that Karl Marx, a Zionist Jew, was easily Darwin's biggest supporter and most historically significant proponent and publicity man. Marx made evolution dogma mandatory propaganda in the USSR in order to eradicate God from the public mind. That pattern sounds familiar? That's because the media is riddled with damn Marxists. Anyway, this particular reviewer recommended memorizing the main points presented in this book so we can all help get the truth out there regarding the factual errors inherent in the evolution idea. It's a good review. So have a look at this book, which we found very, very interesting. There's a note here from someone who probably purchased the book to their father-in-law. Buried Alive, the startling truth about Neanderthal Man. Acknowledgements. Contents. Introduction, and then part 1 is Search for Truth. We've already looked at the introduction, which briefly states, as a young man and a product of 2 university graduate educational programs and 1 an undergraduate level, the author was completely convinced that the Bible could not be taken as a scientific or historically accurate book. The early chapters of Genesis, therefore, were not to be taken seriously as the explanation for the true origin of mankind. As a matter of fact, in college, the author thought anyone who believed that Adam and Eve were real people who spoke to a snake were definitely not biology majors and probably belonged to a flat earth society or worse. This belief was common among most of his university friends. As a result of this widespread attitude in the higher institutions of learning, we have raised a generation in America who do not believe the Bible speaks the truth about anything. Therefore, what may be beautiful writing, poetry, and exciting stories are just that: religious tales, myths, and allegory, but certainly not truth. The marginalization of the Bible is one of the tragic stories of our time. If we want truth, we are told we must look to science. Modern science has the answers, and the great museums of the world hold the keys to our past. In those great temples of learning, all the prehistoric relatives of mankind have been assembled for our education and supposed edification. Large multinational corporations have often sponsored expensive high-tech multimedia exhibits to pursue these ends in a dramatic fashion. The effects of this collaboration have been enormous. Millions of children visit these citadels each year on a school field trips to view their animal relatives. They are immersed in a sea of naturalism while being indoctrinated in the official position of the establishment. But is this official position correct? Are there opposing points of view? And the $64,000 question is, do the museums contain any fossils, artifacts, or information that would contradict the doctrine of evolution? We did look at a book or video quite a while back And this person was saying that you can't go into certain areas of the museum. Only scientists or anthropologists or whoever, archaeologists, those with top ranking, can go in there and check things out. But apparently a lot of the models aren't in the museums of dinosaurs, etc., aren't complete skeletons. Often they piece other pieces together from other animals and so forth, right? Gluing bits and pieces together to make it look like this fantastic dinosaur, flying dinosaur, like a T-Rex with wings or something like that, and weird stuff like that. And then they indoctrinate you to believe that that's the complete skeleton, etc., etc., as he mentions here. The author invites you to take a trip with him through the past by exploring the great museums of the world in the storage rooms and laboratories reserved only for access to scientists. He wasn't going to take you through the exhibit halls where all the tourists go, but into the dark recesses of the paleontological world where you would not be allowed. You are going to see things that you never thought existed and look at skulls and jaws through the eyes of an orthodontist, the guy who specialises in teeth, right? All the bones you will see are the actual ones. This is original work done on the real fossils. You will also visit real caves that were frequented by ancient men. There are scientific sections in this book necessary for those interested in the facts of the research, but everything is wrapped up in the story of the author's personal family adventure, because their family and himself did everything as a team. His research assistants were his children, all of whom are now adults. Another facet of this book is the reaction of the scientific world to his findings. He thinks that who would have at that time thought that you may be incredulous at first by the perceived breach of security and the threat that a questioning orthodontist and his family posed to such gigantic institutions. It was a shock to all the family, right? He did not lie to anyone at any time. He merely stated that he was an orthodontist who was interested in the growth and development of early man, and particularly in the teeth and the jaws. Some of the scientists were open-minded and some were not. He certainly wasn't condemning all paleoanthropologists. To be perfectly candid, he did not expect to find what he did. However, he had no idea that the specimens he examined had not been allowed to display the truth within themselves. The process of writing this book took close to 5 years. It was his hope that it would reach many people in all walks of life. He thought perhaps that even parts of it could be used in academic settings. As the real life story unfolds, it will become evident that the evolutionists were right about one thing, and that is change. All living forms are changing. The only problem is that they had the direction wrong. The theme that flows throughout this entire book and shares the spotlight with that of burying the truth is devolution. It is a process by which all of life is degenerating, just as the Bible describes. Therefore, what began as a curiosity about the past ends with a secure belief about the future. Come along with us as we explore the world, and we explore this book, the world of ancient men, the Neanderthals. Let us take a close look at our supposed ancestors, whose real history has for so long been buried alive. And he goes into the events of what happened, what led up to him discovering shocking lies. I'm going to skip ahead there. There's a couple of chapters where he goes deep into it, and they get chased by a couple of people in sports cars, and they end up in their apartment and all this sort of stuff. And he goes on about maybe they were living in Vietnam, something like that, and they got hold of this X-ray machine. This Dr. Krogman gave it to him, and it didn't seem to work, so they took it to this certain place, and the technicians fixed it, got it going. It was something to do with the wiring, and he realizes all of this happened. It's a miraculous God was there on the scene, right? he has here. People are curious about where they came from. They are seeking answers to the deep feelings within them. Evolution provides an answer both in history and science. It is that men and women are nothing more than animals too. This is the source of all men's problems and animal heritage. Humanistic answers are very popular in modern Europe, where great cathedrals are mere tourist attractions themselves. The religion of the new age is evolution. Therefore, many francs are made in the prehistoric business. Okay, everyone's flocking to this Le Aziz to look at the ancient Neanderthal exhibitions, etc. Thousands and thousands of them. Amidst all the gaiety and vacation atmosphere, an ominous thought occurred to the author. If anyone was able to cast a shadow on the evidence which supports this flourishing trade, they would probably find themselves in a heap of trouble. It seemed very much like Paul, or the Bible, the Apostle Paul, telling the Ephesians around AD 52 that Artemis was not a god. The words of Demetrius, a silversmith from the ancient city in Asia Minor, who made the silver shrines of Artemis, came back to the author. Men, you know that our prosperity depends on this business. This Paul has persuaded and turned away a considerable number of people, saying that gods made with hands are no gods at all. Acts 19:25-26. Whether it be in Paul's journey in the 1st century or in 1979, the threat by Christians to the idol business remains the same. Even though the names of the idols change, Demetrius stirred up the fall of Ephesus by saying, not only is there danger that this trade of ours fall into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis be regarded as worthless, and a riot ensued. Acts 19:27-29. Amicus Plato said Magi's amica veritas. Dear is Plato, but dearer still is truth, was spoken by Aristotle, the renowned philosopher of ancient Greece. This statement was made in reference to his conflict with Plato over the fundamental principles of philosophy. Plato was his beloved teacher, but Aristotle held firm beliefs quite contrary to those of his master. Aristotle's search for truth had led him into this dilemma, but instead of shrinking from the battle, he embraced it, even if it meant contradicting the man to whom he had owed so much. This same type of dilemma has been presented to the author by the evolutionists. He had been accused of biting the hand that fed him. During a lecture at Penn State University on March 15, 1990, at the Hetzel Union Student Centre in the Fishbowl in front of an audience of approximately 500, the author was confronted by an anthropology professor in the front row. Before he even began, he asked who was paying him for that lecture. The lecture was sponsored by the Penn State chapter of Campus Crusade for Christ, to which two of his children, Margie and Daniel, belonged at the time. The author told him that he wouldn't accept any payment for this lecture, and he didn't. The professor, surrounded by students, kept interrupting him throughout the lecture. He wanted to introduce some preliminary thoughts and background material for his research, while he insisted that the author show the Neanderthal radiographs and photographs. He wouldn't let up on him. During the talk, some nasty remarks came from the middle rows. A few days before, a large advertisement in a campus paper had announced that this author would present original Neanderthal research. This advance notice was enough to fuel the flames of intolerance and anti-creationist feeling so much that by the time he arrived on campus, the inferno had peaked. He walked into a booby trap. He found himself in the midst of his own Ephesian-like idol worship controversy with Demetrius in the front seat, the spirit of Demetrius. He succumbed to his pressure, as well as from these people, as well as the snide remarks from many of his students. So yeah, he succumbed to this guy's pressure. He stopped in the middle of his introductory material, asked the projectionist to change the carousels on the projector. He proceeded to show the Neanderthal slides, much to the amazement of the angry professor. Seeing that he really had goods to deliver, and that this wasn't some sort of flim-flam show, that professor listened intently until the author came to some conclusions with which he vehemently disagreed. The author was so nervous that he dropped some of his preliminary overheads and made an error too. Super confidently, he asked how could the author try. Super confidently, this professor asked how he could try to disprove the fossil evidence, which the author was so graciously allowed to see. After all, he explained they didn't have to let him into the museum, or let the author into the museum. The author said that he was grateful but believed the search for truth surpassed all. This probably sounded a little cold, but then consider what Jesus has said about leading little ones astray. False museum displays and textbook diagrams do lead children astray. While never having an Aristotle-Plato relationship with the museum people, the author still must insist, or had to insist, that there still is truth. In fact, he always thought that this was what all scientists were supposed to believe. That was before he saw what was in their museums. What followed thereafter was nearly a riot. After an interrogation by this man about what the author really knew, he proceeded to take the microphone out of his hand and started to address the crowd. He tried to persuade him that the author had made no case at all for biblical truth. To him, evolutionary doctrine was the only thing that made any sense to the intellectuals. After some loud remarks from the crowd, a large group rushed forward at the author and surrounded the podium. Everyone was shouting at once. Demetrius had done his job well. These kids were furious. In the midst of all the confusion, while the author was trying to make a quick exit and not leave anything behind, a student to his right side started to ask this author a question. Someone grabbed him from behind with a chokehold on his neck and told him not to ask the author anything because he's just a preacher anyway. The author, etc., backed out of some doors amidst the near riot. He'll never forget that. He said he'll never forget that night. Margie Daniel and his nephew Jack Cuozzo, also a Penn State student, were as upset as his wife and the author were. And he goes on about their trip through France. It's quite interesting. And the X-ray equipment that they were going to use that next day. Something here about Esther. Okay, he felt like he was Queen Esther when she went in to see King Ahasuerus, supposedly Xerxes. Remember Xerxes on 300? It's a bit of exaggerated Xerxes, but that's what it's supposed to be. Uninvited in order to save her people. Esther was his newly chosen queen. Jews in 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia were going to be destroyed according to the evil plan of a man named Haman. He convinced the king that the Jews were different and did not observe the king's laws, mainly because of his hatred of Esther's uncle Mordecai. Mordecai persuaded Esther that it was her duty to go into the king's chambers and plead with the king to rescind this order. Watch the film to get this particular story of this guy Haman. It's the story of Esther with Brian Blessed, great actor, as Uncle Mordecai. Yeah, it's really good. Mordecai persuaded Esther that it was her duty to go into the king's chambers and plead with the king to rescind this order. Esther was finally convinced. She knew, however, that if she went in to see the king uninvited, she risked death. It was the law of the kingdom that anyone who went into the king's inner court who had not been specifically summoned would be put to death unless the king extended to that person the golden scepter. This act alone would save her life. Esther 3:4. We can find examples of this hatred today. Esther doesn't really talk much about God, okay, but she was godly. It's mainly about her and this king, right? And her uncle Mordecai and the Jews that would be persecuted, or would have been persecuted by this Haman guy. The Hamans, okay, you can find examples of this hatred today. The Hamans of this world are spoken in our generation. Preston Cloud, Professor Emeritus of Biogeology and Environmental Issues at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and speaking about the issues involved in creation versus evolution debate, had said the other issue is whether an extremist group of religious bigots shall be permitted to abridge the constitutionally guaranteed separation of church and state. Cloud seem to be saying that these people are different and they don't want to observe the laws of the state. Words exactly like Haman's are heard lashing out thousands of years later. God's people. Over 100 years ago, Thomas Huxley argued in the same way against the fundamentalist Christians' view that men were not descendants from apes by stating, could not a sensible child confute by obvious arguments the shallow rhetoricians who would force this conclusion upon us. This Thomas Huxley we found is possibly, well, this is what we found, the father of Adolphus Huxley, who said the whole point of education is to do what you're meant to do when you're meant to do it. It's probably we found this a saying he got from his father. As a young man, Huxley had his naturalist experiences aboard a ship appropriately named the HMS Rattlesnake. He goes on about the Musée de l'Homme. This is a museum. And its X-ray machine. He spoke to Dr. Krogman, who tried to put him onto a Dr. Fehrenbach, but none of them contacted him. And here it is, the important part here. He said he knew of Dr. Krogman's research in anthropology. This is Dr. V. Coppens. Knew of Dr. Krogman's research in anthropology, but did not know the man himself. He was adamant, or stubborn, dogmatic, determined about not letting the author in the museum labs with their famous skulls. They both spoke of Dr. Krogman's work during World War II, and that must have hit a responsive note in his memory. As the author turned to leave and was about ready to give up the whole thing, Dr. V. Eves Coppens told him that his father and mother had been captured by Nazis during the occupation of France. Their lives had somehow been saved by American soldiers in the liberation campaign after the invasion of June 6, 1944. The Nazis had threatened their lives, but some American GIs rescued them and returned them to their home. For this reason, he was very grateful and said that he owed the Americans a favour. He said he had never paid us Americans, or the Americans, back for what they did for his parents. Therefore, it was because of this act by some courageous soldiers during World War II that he would allow the author to do his research project on the Neanderthal fossils in the Musée de l'Homme. He was stunned. The author was stunned. He had extended to him the golden scepter and told him to come back at 2 p.m. to meet the lab workers. With his mind reeling, the author sincerely thanked them and floated down on the elevator and out to the van where an expectant group of people awaited his arrival and the verdict. He thought he would need smelling salts to revive everyone, but they all agreed that the goodness of God is beyond all we may expect to think. It was 1 p.m. and he had to report back in an hour, 2 p.m. So they went across the street to the sidewalk, had a feed, right? And he reported back, met some of the lab assistants, okay, and where the famous fossils were stored. Dr. Coppens was to leave for vacation next day, so basically the author was to be only superficially supervised. That's what he told these technicians, etc. That night, his two oldest boys, John and Frank, helped him to squeeze the 350 pounds of X-ray equipment and all the other necessary things into the van to be ready to go to the next morning. To go do the examinations. The General Electric miracle. They put it all together. He actually taught his son, looks like 13 years old, how to put it all together. They put it all together, and there was no response no matter what they did. The author couldn't believe that so many doors were open for this project, only to have the whole thing go down the drain because of the faulty equipment. He's spoken to someone, Dr. Brown, about a possible thing like this happening, and he told him, "Oh, it's all packed up good and all that sort of stuff, right? There shouldn't be anything wrong with it." But it didn't work. And they took it to a General Electric office, and there's all these technicians sitting there waiting to get paid for some work they'd done, and miraculously they fixed this machine, got it going, and then they left. Right? If they had got paid, apparently they wouldn't have bothered, right? Okay, so he was gazing over the shoulders of all these technicians when the same man who said apparently one of the men pointed to a battery of fuses in one section of the control box. He was gazing over their shoulders when the same man started securing all the fuses more tightly in their sockets and replacing one or two others. After this procedure, the unit was turned on and the push buttons lit up for the first time since they left New Jersey. When the switch button on the end of the cord was pressed, X-rays flowed out of the head, accompanied by a beautiful and familiar hum. One of the repairmen explained to us in part English and part French that it was only a few fuses that were the sources of the difficulty. It was only a few minutes later that the receptionist burst into the workroom with the good news that all the paychecks had come in by courier and that the men could now have them and be on their way to their respective vacations. Stunned by this news, his son and the author's son John and himself realised that if the paychecks had made their appearance prior to their arrival, there wouldn't have been any repairmen in the shop at all. Or if they came while they were working on the thing, their interest might have rapidly faded. When you get paid, you don't care about anything else, right? You got your money, you're off on vacation, because that's what they were doing once they got paid. Good news for them would have been bad news for us. Once again, we saw God's hand move on our behalf, and we were struck with awe, wonder, and praise. Brilliant. God was there for them. Neanderthal skulls put it to an orthodontic test. What is the big deal about the special kind of X-ray test for the Neanderthal skulls? This type of X-ray was going to allow measurement to be made accurately inside the skulls while at the same time seeing the true outside dimensions. It was also going to be able to see the places where the bones were glued together with a kind of plastic material. It might then be possible to discover if the reconstruction was done properly or if some artistic license was involved. After the General Electric miracle of August 7, he and his family returned to their apartment with the newly restored equipment. On the 8th of August 1979, the first cephalometric X-rays of Neanderthals in history were taken in the Musée de l'Homme laboratory. Why had it taken so long for the two disciplines to cross? The author did not know, but on that day, Neanderthal human paleontology and orthodontic science were joined together. The machine was humming nicely all day, and they had the key to the French Neanderthal kingdom, which was contained in a small cabinet in the lab. He did not take this responsibility lightly. These were national treasures which they were allowed to handle, and the author here must emphasise that they treated them with utmost respect. He was told by Dr. Krogman that these were the fossils sought after so earnestly by Hitler's men in their attempt to find more evidence to support his Darwinian claim of survival of the fittest. It was, and still is, note this, it was and still is an important teaching in the evolutionary process that natural selection eliminates those creatures that are weak while the strong ones move on. You have a look at if you can get hold of the PDF or actual book of the origins of species. On the front there, it's got something about I can't remember the exact words. Something like the preservation of the races. Can't really remember it, but yeah, apparently it's that's what it's hinting at. Okay, to eliminate the weak. Okay, and have the stronger, the more superior survive. Okay? This is basically what Hitler was trying to do here. It was and still is an important teaching in the evolutionary process that natural selection eliminates those creatures that are weak while the strong ones move on. Survival of the species. Yeah, something like that. For Hitler, these fossils could have been a way of validating a thought process, intent on destroying those whom he designated as weak and building up those whom he had designated as strong, i.e. the Aryan race. Okay, so we could put that, or show that cover, we'll place a link underneath so you can have a look at that. I think Ray Comfort, the ex-New Zealand or Kiwi preacher, pointed that out. You can have a look at it yourself. These then were the fossils that were kept out of harm's way by the wisdom of the French paleontologist. The author found this difficult to believe with the Nazis occupying that whole country. It is no wonder that his hands shook when he first picked Pech de la Aze. Our French sucks. Okay, we're just making an attempt. The little Neanderthal child's skull out of the drawer. His son John kept cautioning him, "Dad, be careful." The author was trying as hard as he could. They had large piles of sponges that they gently placed under each skull when they set it in the head holder. Here, figure 1. so as to support it from underneath. Please refer to the research notes for the scientific details of this and other Neanderthal children's studies, and figure 1 for the picture of the peck child in the head holder. One thing you must understand is that at this point in his research career, his reference material was not very plentiful. He had a copy of the Catalogue of Fossil Hominids, and most importantly a book called Neanderthals Centenary, given to him before the trip by Dr. Krogman. This was his personal copy since 1958, a gift of the Vienna Green Foundation, and he signed it for him, the author, on the inside cover. To Jack Cuozzo, DDS, in friendship with all good wishes, Wilton Krogman, PhD, June 1979. This book was remarkable because of what it contained. It was on page 270 that the author saw something that just about shocked him to the foundations of his being. There on that page in black and white was an article about the little Neanderthal child that was sitting on the lab bench right in front of him. This was no coincidence. It was totally in French and written by E. Pater of Poitiers, France. On the next page there was an illustration of the skull with what appeared to be its lower jaw out of joint. This was not a photograph, it was only a drawing. Nevertheless, it was supposed to represent the real relationship of the lower jaw to the upper jaw and the skull. So why did this upset him so much? He picked up the Pec de l'Az skull in his hands and carefully placed the lower teeth against the upper teeth in what we orthodontist, because he was an orthodontist, right, call centric occlusion, normal central position of upper and lower teeth with maximum contact of all the cusps. The author did this over and over, 3, 4 times, 5 times, and each time the jaw condyles ends fitted perfectly together in the sockets when the teeth were in this maximum centric occlusion position. It didn't look like the drawing at all. Yeah. Here, his teeth missing, etc., etc. Pater's diagram of whatever that is in French, skull with lower jaw out of joint. It didn't look like the drawing at all. Well, the author thought, maybe there is a good reason for this. He checked what Pater had to say in his description in the text of the article. He did take 3 years of high school French and 2 years in college, and he was thankful that he could at least read French even though he couldn't speak it very well. He said, whatever that is in French. Translation: when the teeth are placed in occlusion or contact, the condyle does not fit properly, articulate with the socket in the cranium or skull, but it really did fit with the teeth in the normal occlusion, normal contact position. See figure 2 for Pater's reconstruction of Pec de l'Az. Figure 2 here. That's how he drew it. But it really did fit with the teeth in the normal occlusion, normal contact position. With great trepidation, the author first checked the real photos of Pec in the illustrations in the back of the Neanderthal Centenary book. They matched exactly, only it didn't show the lower and the upper jaw together with the teeth in contact. Besides that, the name Pec de l'Az was written on the right side of the skull that the author held in his hands. There was no mistaking it. This actually was the Pec child. However, this was a new non-ape-like position of the lower jaw. For a moment, the author's mind was unable to entirely comprehend what he was really observing. He thought back to his agreement with Dr. Coppens concerning the handing in of the duplicate X-rays when the project was complete. The author knew that if he placed the lower jaw where it should be, that this would be a major clash with E. Pater's reconstruction in evolutionary theory. If the author took his radiographs in this new and correct position, because the teeth fit together perfectly, this would be a shock for everyone in the Department of Human Paleontology in France, and eventually in the world. See figure 2a. He did what he had to do, the author. He took all the pictures and radiographs in the new anatomically correct real position. He was unaware of it then, but Francis Ivanhoe had written an article in Nature magazine in 1970 defining the teeth as grossly maloccluded with numerous enamel and crown anomalies. This was also wrong. Here's figure 2a. Lateral Ceph X-ray of Pec de l'Az. Figure 3. La Chapelle aux Saints, an X-ray head holder. Grossly maloccluded means that the teeth didn't fit together in one good occlusion bite. The author had been an orthodontist at the time of this discovery for 13 years, and at the time of this writing for 31 years. If there's one thing that he knew, it's how teeth are supposed to fit together by the cusps and weird patterns, and what is and what isn't a normal occlusion or bite. He couldn't imagine Ivanhoe seeing what he saw and writing what he wrote. It wasn't grossly malocluded. He was grossly wrong. And what we found online about Jack Cuozzo, a dentist and young earth creationist, who believed that Neanderthals are ordinary humans who live for hundreds of years, causing the skull to continue to grow. His career as a dentist was actually somewhat ironic. Look at that word. Define it. As he should have known that age can be judged in fossilized individuals based on an examination of several types of tooth development, and that such research has confirmed that Neanderthals did not live for hundreds of years. Okay, so it's not really undermining the guy, it's just he's saying, well, you know, you're saying that these Neanderthals lived 300, 400 years and then died. Yeah, it's incorrect. Scientific qualifications: Bachelor of Science, Biology, Major Philosophy, minor at Georgetown University, MS, Oral Biology, Loyola University, Chicago, Graduate School of Dentistry, Certificate of Specialty in Orthodontics, DDS, University of Pennsylvania, USA. And there's the official website, needs references. So we had a look at that website on Angel Fire. Buried Alive: The Startling Truth About Neanderthal Man by Jack Cuozzo, and he sadly passed away March 23, 2017, not so long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And has here Dr. Cuozzo has a chapter in his new book, The Neanderthal Adolescent Le Monsieur, that's in French, Band 12, New Aspects, New Results. It was published by the Startling Museum in Berlin, edited by Herbert Ulrich, included chapters by Ian Tattersall and Jeffrey Swartz, Jennifer Thompson and Andrew Nelson, Bruno Morel, etc., plus many other Neanderthal experts in the world. Dr. Cuozzo's research on the Le Monsieur Neanderthal remains shows that the original skull was improperly reconstructed based on evolutionary presuppositions. So they deliberately did this and probably lied about it. Yeah. Presented false facts, evidence. You know. Dr. Cuozzo's radiographs of the skull indicate that the individual was not ape-like at all, but human, and followed a biblical rate of maturation, right? There it is there, if you can find it, Buried Alive, the book. We found it online. There's a CD supplement, Captured Alive by the Devil in France. And he's got some others you can look at here. Yeah. And okay, this is very informative, so you can have a look at those. There's also audio files. Okay, so he's saying that back here somewhere, he actually goes on to say about Neanderthal Man, maybe it's back here somewhere, was around before Adam. You'd have to read what we've shown you to actually see that. And he goes on more about what he discovered. Yeah, we did read something where he's saying that Neanderthal Man came before the humanoid. It's been proven. So we compared it with the original ancient, very old Brita in the Aramaic, or Genesis in English, scriptures. Okay, here is Genesis 1:27. And God created the human being to resemble his own visage. Visage, we need to define it, means likeness, his face, basically, right? He created the human being to resemble his own visage, his own likeness. He created them male and female. Okay? So he's created two or more. Right? Two sexes, male and female. Man and woman. And God blessed them and said to them, multiply and increase, and fill the earth and its environment, and have authority over the fish, etc., etc. And then God gives them all the herbs and all that sort of stuff. And then they waddled off to wherever. Right? Possibly to, because everything is, in Scripture is, they went to the east, they moved to the east, right? Well, they couldn't go west because apparently all the land mass was together, so you'd end up in the sea, something like that. Go north, you end up in the sea. South, you end up in the sea. So they all got pushed basically towards the east. Probably in the desert regions, i.e. the land of Nod, the land of wandering, where Cain ended up after killing his brother. And that's why he said, God, it's bad enough I'm out of your presence, you sent me away from you, but I've got to go into this land. If somebody finds me or comes across me, they'll kill me. So God puts a special sign on him, nobody touch Cain or us, right? Okay, so there it says, and God created the human being to resemble his own visage. He created them male and female. Okay, that's the first man creating or being creating act. Okay, there's a difference. It's Genesis 2. God creates another being, this human being, the humanoid, and the Lord God molded Adam from the dust. He formed him, created him from the dust, or the earth, or the ground, or the soil, to resemble himself, to look like him, to be in his likeness, right? And he blew on their faces the breath of life, and Adam became a living soul. Okay? So he was an inanimate soul, lifeless, and he breathed on him, he became an animate soul, a living being. Yeah? But the difference between, so look at footnotes here for 27. 127.1, literal Aramaic word, Adam. 127.2, literal Aramaic idiomatic construction. There created God to Adam with his visage, and the visage of God he created him, male and female. He created them. That's how it comes out when you translate it, okay, before you correct it. Okay. Into more grammatical, correct English, right? 128, literal Aramaic idiom or expression. God created the Aboriginal man. It's not talking about the Australian Aborigine. It's in this Victor N. Alexander, the Aramaic translator from Bet Narain of Mesopotamia, Syria, used this term Aboriginal man in regards to the indigenous people, the people that kept their ingenuity, or they can't be right, indigenous culture, their tradition, etc. Right? Those that remained indigenous, put it like that. He has another part to this called the theory of the Aborigine, where he explains all that. Right. So this is a pre-Adamic being. This being didn't have the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit, right, where they could walk and talk, be in the presence of God, etc., etc. Whereas the second being, created from the dust, the Adam, was given that breath of life plus had the Spirit, right, so they could connect with God, walk and talk. And that's why through Genesis he didn't talk to the Aboriginals, really, didn't spend much time with them, or any time with them at all. And with this second being, they walked and talked in the presence of God, right? And that's what Cain was saying. He verifies that. Behold, you have removed me in this age, or this era, from the face of the earth, and I lie hidden from your presence. And Cain left the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of the nomads, wanderers, those who wandered the desert regions east of Eden. See how they all go to the east? And then Adam and Eve get pushed to the east, out of the garden to the east. And Cain took a wife. He found himself a wife there. And he became pregnant, gave birth to Enoch. And Cain started a village, etc., etc. So, being hidden from his presence, that footnote there. 4:14. 1. Literal Aramaic idiom or expression, Umana, age, also daily. Umana, age, is for the first footnote indication. On the face of the earth, and I lie hidden from your presence. Also daily, okay, yeah. So that's what it means. The age. Age, also daily. Because here, like Christians always say, oh, God made everything in 6 literal days, rested on the 7th. But according to these original manuscripts from the Brita of the Lishon Artika Cypriot, from the Kitab Esra, it has a completely different meaning when translated. The evening and the morning became part of one cycle of the first eon. Footnote indication. So get out and have a look at that. And here it is, translated into the nearest English equivalent. 153. Literal Aramaic word. Yuma. Euma, eon. Immeasurable period, day or age or day. Day with a capital D, possibly because the Aramaic or the Hebrew, let's say the Hebrew day, was very different to the day that we know and have come to understand in that sense today. Okay. So that verifies that there were Neanderthal Man. So these manuscripts are the only ones that express that. This is also according to Victor and Alexander. They're the only manuscripts, shock and behold, when he translated it, he saw that. Yeah? And that's why he did a theory, hoping to get it out there, of the Neanderthal Man being in these manuscripts. The original ancient, very old Brita in the Aramaic, or Genesis in English. Okay, so he gets these strange telephone calls by the looks of it. They were in their borrowed apartment on Thursday, August 16th, and had just finished breakfast when the telephone rang. Certainly the call couldn't be for them, right? Wrong. He picked up the phone, the author, picked up the phone with some hesitation, knowing that his French wouldn't get him too far. Bonjour, the female voice with a very distinct French accent said on the other end. This is Bach Nguyen's sister. Something earlier, like a friend or something like that, said that they could go and stay with their sisters, Vietnamese sister or something like that. This is Bach Nguyen's sister. I am calling to ask you to come to dinner at our home on Saturday night, the 18th. Funny, the author thought. Bach said that his sister didn't speak English too well. We can come and pick you up, she continued before he could say very much. No, the author said. I'm very sorry, but we might not be in Paris on Saturday. We are leaving today for Normandy to see the invasion beaches from World War II. Okay, she replied. But when can you come? He thought about it, the author. He thought about it for a few seconds and responded that he was not sure when they would come, but that they did want to visit them, that family, and that he would call them back as soon as he returned on Saturday or Sunday. He also told this lady that he had lost her number, so she gave it to him, and he never recognised it as being different from the one Bach had given him. After the author hung up, he began to wonder how she got their number, but he remembered that he gave it to Bach before he left home. Pick us up, the author thought. Isn't that nice? He didn't have the slightest doubt that he was talking to Bach's sister. Why wouldn't he? Why should he? Not until the day before they left France did he know anything different. Him and his family were so busy packing, and the kids were so excited about seeing the invasion beaches in Normandy, that the author gave only a little more thought to this telephone call, and he put it out of his mind. He put the slip of paper with their number in his wallet, and off they went in their white van. Before they left, the author had made a reservation at the Novotel on the north side of Caen, France, which is very close to the Normandy beaches. They reached their destination the afternoon of the 16th, and it was getting late, so they checked into the motel and just drove around a bit until dark. They took no special precautions of any kind because they never had any idea that they were being followed wherever they went. After dinner, they all went to bed, but the author had to go out to the car a few times for various things. He was still oblivious to any lurking trouble. The next morning, August 17th, as he walked through the lobby past the registration desk, one of the attendants behind the counter stopped him to ask a question. He asked if the author was Mr. McHugh. The author said no, he had no idea who he was talking about. He explained that someone had just called and was looking for this Mr. McHugh, who the caller had said was an American. He continued by saying that he and his family were the only Americans in the Novotel at that time. The author explained that he did not know this man, but his brother-in-law was named McHugh. Obviously, this wasn't anyone calling for him, since he was back in the USA, so the family went on their way. Okay, so there's something weird going on there. People are checking him, etc., etc. We could provide a continual. We could a part 2 to this. If you want us to, let us know in the comments, and we will do that to see what else went on. Was somebody following him after his discoveries? Were they out to get him? Let us know in the comments, and we'll provide a part 2 to this. In the meantime, if you really enjoyed this particular video, then please subscribe to our channel, give us a like, add your comments below, and we will get back to you on those as soon as possible, as they're very important to us. And then go share this video with all your family, friends, church members, neighbours, etc. And say, well, look, this book about this orthodontist and his discoveries found that these museums, etc., these